Title: He rescued a small alien girl. 3 days later, her sister stood at his door. Beginning: It was a stormy night when Mark found her. He was working late at his small rural farmhouse, tending to the broken fence that ran along his land. His tools were scattered in the fading light as rain battered the earth, but it was the sound, a strange, high-pitched whimper, that caught his attention. Turning toward the source, Mark's eyes widened when he saw a small, trembling figure lying in a patch of tall grass. It was humanoid, no taller than a child, but its skin shimmered with a pale violet hue, and its eyes, huge and dark, shone with an otherworldly glow. Despite the oddity of it all, Mark didn't hesitate. He rushed forward, lifting the small alien girl in his arms. She was barely conscious, her body cold and frail. Mark knew he had to get her inside, to warmth, to safety. He carried her into his home and laid her down on his couch, his heart racing with the sudden rush of worry. She wasn't human, but she was alive, and that was enough. For hours he watched over her, listening to the storm rage outside, and the strange girl, once trembling and barely breathing, slowly began to stir. The next morning, Mark was in his kitchen when he heard her voice, soft but clear. "Where am I?" she asked, sitting up on the couch, her eyes scanning the unfamiliar room. "You're safe," Mark said, placing a steaming cup of tea on the table next to her. "I found you last night in the storm." She blinked, seemingly confused, then glanced down at her clothes, torn and dirty from the night outside, and then back at him. "I'm lost," she murmured. Mark took a cautious step forward. "What happened? Who are you?" I'm called Lyra," she answered, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was with others, but I don't know where they are now." Mark's heart sank. The creature in front of him was more than a lost traveler. It was something alien, something far from this planet. He hadn't wanted to ask, but there was a creeping sense of fear that gnawed at his insides. "You were alone in the storm. How did you end up here?" Mark asked gently. Lyra looked down, her large eyes filling with sadness. "We were attacked. My sisters and I. It was a ship. Crashed and I ran. I didn't know where to go." Her voice trembled with the weight of the memory, and Mark felt a strange ache in his chest for her. She wasn't just lost, she had been in danger, and now she had no one. Over the following days, Mark took care of her. He gave her food and warmth. He showed her his farm, though she seemed more fascinated by the animals than the crops, and slowly Lyra began to trust him. Middle to end. 3 days passed. Mark had begun to feel a strange attachment to Lyra, an odd bond that he hadn't expected. But that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Mark's world was suddenly turned upside down. A knock came at the door. Mark, startled, froze. His first thought was that it was someone from the nearby town, but when he opened the door, his blood ran cold. Standing before him were 3 figures, tall, beautiful, and undeniably alien. They had the same violet skin as Lyra, but their presence was far more intense, commanding. The leader, a woman with sharp features and a regal air, stepped forward, her piercing eyes locked on Mark. "You have our sister," she said, her voice as cold as the wind that howled behind her. "Return her to us." Mark stepped back instinctively, his heart hammering in his chest. He could feel Lyra's presence behind him, and when he glanced over his shoulder, he saw the fear in her eyes. I don't know what you're talking about," Mark stammered, his mind racing for an explanation, though nothing made sense. "She came here hurt. She was alone." The leader's eyes narrowed, her gaze flicking toward Lyra, who stood hesitantly in the doorway. For a moment there was silence, heavy and thick with tension. Then the leader spoke again, her tone softer but still firm. "We are her family. She is not meant for your world. You do not know the danger she brings." Mark's eyes flicked back to Lyra, who looked torn, her expression a mixture of relief and sorrow. "She didn't choose this," Mark finally said, stepping forward. "She's scared just like anyone else would be. She's been through something terrible. She just needs help. Please, I can't just send her away." The alien woman studied him for a long moment, her sharp gaze softening ever so slightly. Then, with a flick of her hand, she turned to the others. "Take her," she commanded, and Lyra's sisters moved to step past Mark. But before they could reach her, Lyra stepped forward, her voice breaking through the tension. I don't want to go back," she said, her words barely a whisper. "I want to stay with him." Mark's heart soared at her words, and he glanced at the alien women. "She's made her choice," he said firmly. "And I'm not letting you take her." The leader's eyes darkened, but she didn't speak. After a long, tense silence, she turned to leave, signaling for her sisters to follow. "We will return," the leader said over her shoulder. "This is not over." Ending. As the last of the alien women disappeared into the night, Mark closed the door with a sigh of relief. He looked at Lyra, who stood beside him, trembling but resolute. "They won't come back, will they?" she asked, her voice quiet but steady. Mark placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "If they do, we'll deal with it. But right now you're safe. And that's all that matters." The storm outside had finally passed, leaving the world calm and still. Lyra smiled softly at him, her eyes filled with gratitude. And as the night stretched on, Mark realized that his life had been irrevocably changed, not by the storm, but by the small alien girl who had come to him in her time of need. For now she was safe, and that was enough. 3 days later, as Mark stood at the door, a cold chill swept through him. 3 figures, tall and imposing, their violet skin glowing faintly, stood on his doorstep. The leader, a striking alien woman, stepped forward, her eyes sharp and unyielding. "You have our sister," she declared, her voice like ice. "Return her to us." Mark froze, his mind racing. Behind him, Lyra stood quietly, her large eyes filled with fear. I didn't mean to steal her away," Mark said, trying to gather his thoughts. "She was alone, injured. She needed help." The alien woman's gaze softened for a moment, but she quickly regained her composure. "You do not understand the danger she brings. She is not meant for your world." Mark stepped forward, his heart pounding. "She's just a child. She needs safety, not threats." Lyra's sisters moved closer, but she stepped in front of Mark. "I don't want to go back," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I want to stay with him." The tension thickened, the alien's eyes darting between Lyra and Mark. For a long, silent moment, the leader considered, then gave a sharp nod. "We will return for her," she said coldly, signaling for the others to retreat. Mark breathed a sigh of relief as the 3 alien women disappeared into the night. Lyra looked up at him, her expression filled with gratitude and sadness. "Thank you," she whispered, the warmth of her words touching Mark's heart. For now Lyra was safe, and Mark knew that, no matter what the future held, he'd protect her, no matter the cost.